For me, but I think I have only something like 15-20 minutes left. I don't have any written complete paper with me, and that's partially my incompetence and partially this is deliberately done because I don't believe in that kind of formal written papers. And the other thing is this, that the notes I have jotted down, and I have just a fragment of one of my earlier publications. I think that would do for this present thing. But you have spent a long day, whole day, attending sessions, listening to people. I think all of us are very tired, exhausted. It's exhausting. And I will take... would it be okay if I finish it off within 10 minutes, just giving the main points? That would be better for the audience and the few people who are... Okay, fine.
You can take
my main contention of this presentation is that actually diaspora was always there. And it is there. Then why recently we have started talking about diaspora, talking about borders, talking about migration, talking about multilingualism. Indian subcontinent was always a place for multiple languages. We were, though now we are separated by this artificial border called, the border that is there between Bangladesh and India, the political country. Our reality was different from other realities in other places, the people who have perhaps concocted these ideas of multilingualism and things like that. My main contention of this presentation is that this very recent fashion of talking about diaspora, of borders, crossing borders, multilingualism, are all these have somehow turned into commodities. So, and because of these commodities, we are now, so much interested in talking about these things, writing paper about these things, and arranging, sessions where we can talk about diaspora, diasporic conditions, of course, borders, and borders are always there. People, from one place to another, people go, people travel, and people keep their memories with them. People suffer. People also gain at the same time. So it's nothing new, nothing. I don't think that something had happened in the last 50 or 100 years for which we should actually, pick this ideas, concepts, especially. But we do that because of certain people, of certain kind of, formulations of ideas and their packaging and their trading. Especially in the discipline we called English studies. And I think this, diaspora is as a part of post-colonial studies, post-colonialism as such, though I am a part of that, post-colonial condition, post-colonial studies, post-colonialism, and, English language teaching, devoid of English studies, that means literature and all these things. These are the two aberrations English studies are suffering for the last few decades. So my position is this, and from that position I would like to come up with certain observation at first. Few days back, months back, I went off to Ukhia, Rohingya camp to visit there and to spend some few hours. As Munzul Islam Sahib was talking in the morning, he has his own experience of visiting a place like that. And I tried to talk with the young people there, the naked boys and girls almost. They have just only the loincloths and they don't have anything else. They were playing. And none of them is even aware why they were there. I tried to talk with some of the older grown-up people, and some of them were very happy staying there because they get 3 meals every day. Okay, they are happy with that, and some of them are, of course, involved with this kind of business, trafficking, even women trafficking, drug trafficking, things like that. But most of the people who are there waiting to be to go back to Myanmar, they have this memory. They want to go to Myanmar, but they don't want to. They want to stay there. Okay. So this is something, yes, these people are forced to leave their own place. they were forced to come to this country, to our place, and they might have this kind of feeling of going back. Even they don't want to, because they think that they are better off here in this, though they are living in a kind of prison house, it's barbed wire, and they live in enclosures. I can compare this experience with another experience that I met one immigrant from Honduras in San Francisco in 2018. And I spent 2 days with that illegal immigrant in his car. I actually traveled in his car. He's a driver. And he told me at the end that he would rather die there in San Francisco rather instead of going back to his own place, Honduras. That means he doesn't want to go back to Honduras. He's illegal there. He drives the car illegally. He has 3 jobs, 2 other jobs, off-time jobs, and all these things are illegal. Yet he wants to stay there. So is he a part of the diaspora we are talking about? Should he be considered an immigrant who is suffering from this memory and loss and trauma and whatnot? This is another thing. I can talk about my own experience. My father died in 1981 when I was a young boy in the school. And my father actually came to this part of Bangladesh from West Bengal before the partition. So our family doesn't have any trauma of partition and all these things. But in 1980, one day he was criticizing and he was talking about his, that homeland so-called in the West Bengal. And he was still planning to go back to the West Bengal. Is he a member of that kind of diaspora who is not happy here? Who actually came to British India, East Bengal. Then he discovered himself in East Pakistan. Then, with or without his support, he discovered himself in an independent country, Bangladesh, and he was not happy here. He wanted to go back to India. Okay. So I shared these 3 different experiences from 3 different timelines because of this, that the concept of diaspora, the concept of migration, this travel and staying in other places, these are so different, complex, complicated, that coming up with one rubric and calling all of them as diasporic people is something almost showing disrespect and, coming up, imposing, or you can say throwing indignity onto these people. And I can, in this context, I remember what Spivak talks about third world women writings in translation, in politics of translation. Okay, that all these different countries, that means the writings from Philippines, the writing from Sri Lanka, the writing from Bangladesh, writing from Egypt, writing from the all other African countries, all these writings in English translation, they read the same. Why? Because the translators, they standardize these different kind of writings by different kind of writers in English, in an English that would be readable to a particular kind of readership, might be more or less half-educated high school students, or even grown-ups who have just that kind of education, who are interested in this kind of writing, the people who also support the women cause all over the world, but they are not interested to enter into the nuances, enter into the complications of the complex writings of these different kind of women of different places. So considering all these, immigrations, all these migrations, all these, crossing borders of different times, of different kind of sets of experiences, and calling them with one, bringing all them together under one rubric, that's diaspora and things like that. This is, I think, that doesn't do justice to these people. That's a problem for me, and I think that's a problem with the whole discourse of diaspora as part of post-colonial studies. Now we can start with this debate between, the Martin Bowman and James Clifford's debate between the etymological use of this word diaspora and then the generic, or you can say metaphoric use of the word. And it always happens that yes, a word changes its meaning because of the different kind of uses, and it acquires other meanings, and then gradually the term becomes capable of including the other things into it, and ultimately the word also travels from its etymological root to a long way to other things, to other meanings acquiring. It's possible, and one of the stalwarts of this kind of discourses in the field of diaspora is Bijoy Mishra, and of course there are people like Paul Gilroy, James Clifford, of course, and Safran, and Stuart Hall is also there. So all these people, they talk about these things, and there is one book published in 2006 by Sudesh Mishra, Diaspora Criticism. If we actually go through these different essays in this book, we come across this kind of, you can say, apology and justification of using this term diaspora. Okay? And the arguments put by different scholars there, it's a very remarkable, good book. But yet, these arguments are not well convincing. There are lacunas, lapses, and there are problems with this kind of argument. If we actually go through this or identify these lacunas, lapses, we find certain paradoxes with this very discourse that is called diaspora literature, and diaspora literature as a part of English studies. This is our concept. Diaspora, the original diaspora, actually the original diaspora is not the Jewish diaspora. That is a wrong perception. The original diaspora is the fall from heaven. The very fact that we are on earth, we are in diaspora. So each and every one of us here, we are living in diaspora. And we all desire to go to that place, okay, of our heart's desire, Eden, heaven, or wherever. Okay. So who doesn't belong to diaspora? So why should certain people, a handful of people of a particular class with particular kind of motivations, they claim to be the only privileged members of this diaspora with which they can do their business and trades. Okay. People like, of course, Homi Bhabha and Spivak, and even Rajshahi. Okay. And of course we, the petty people here, with them. Okay. So this is one thing. So the sense of belonging should be the central concern of diaspora, and yes, everyone talks about this sense of belonging, the belonging. And where do they belong? Where did my father belong to? Where does that Pompey in San Francisco he belong to? Where do these Burmese, the Myanmar Rohingyas, they belong to? Where do the prostitutes in Banishanta belong to? When we talk about diaspora, when we talk about this kind of migrations and all this, do we think of these prostitutes? 3 million women get trafficked each year in the world, and most of them end up in brothels. Do they live in diaspora? So this is something that we tend to ignore, because becoming aware of these complexities, becoming aware of these groups of people doesn't help us develop our own discourse of diaspora. Our diaspora consists of people like Arif Anwar. Okay. A person who even doesn't know the meanings of very common known Bangla words. Okay. And our concern, our discourse consists of narratives that must include. I can remember my early days when we used to go to cinema halls and watch movies. Okay, and each and every movie had to have certain conditions, like there must be a dance in the rain, there must be things like that. So modern day diasporic novels or fiction must include certain things, like at least 3 airports, at least citizens of 7 different countries, and at least 3 or 4 of them must be mixed. Okay, and all of them should be suffering from the sense of memory and loss. What a stupidity this is. Okay. I'm sorry that I have mentioned just to name one novelist. I don't want to show any disrespect to Arif Anwar. Just the name came to my mind, and I'm sorry for that. But there are many others like him or like them. This is the first thing. The second thing about this paradox of diaspora is the concept of locality. The diasporic people, they have this desire to come back as if. That means they live in one locality and they desire for another one. But the present day diaspora or the discourse of diaspora has certain, things like, say, transnational migration, global deterritorialization, and cultural hybridity. That means the question of locality is totally, completely lost. When these diasporic people and their literary discourses or literary texts, they talk about their memory and loss, they don't talk about as individuals, and they don't talk about particular places or locations. They talk about abstract idea of home. So this very, vicious tendency of abstracting, or you can say coming up or transforming real places into abstract concepts, ideas, constructs, is something that's very, very bad, harmful for living human beings, especially for the individuals. So the good concept of locality, so this is the paradox, one of the, you can say, self-contradiction, one of the paradoxes that we find in there. And if you are interested in this, then you can read one book, Diaspora, Identity and Religion. And this is a very, very interesting book because the concept of diaspora is inseparably connected to our deep, deep religious response or approach towards our existence and the meaning of our existence. This book was edited by three people. The first one was Walter Kokot, K-O-K-O-T. It was published in 2004. Because of this, you can say, the paradoxes, and because of this loss of locality, and because there is no sense of coming back, we suffer. We talk about our loss, but we don't want to come back. Ask those the migrated people, and ask them to come back to their own countries. How many of them will come back? But the funny thing is that they would continue talking about their homeland, as if this homeland is a kind of raw material they need to manufacture their product over there, like daddy, and which they would sell, their products in these homelands. So they need these places. So their homes are rather their marketplaces, not their homes. Okay. So that's the problem with this particular diaspora is real. Diaspora is painful. Diaspora is full of agony, suffering. But only a handful few of people who claim that they belong to they are the members of this diaspora. This is something that's not justified. That's my position. That's my point. So they don't have any kind of urge to return. And a diaspora that fails to afford this urge to return is not a diaspora. Plain and simple. And because of that, might be 11 or 12 years back, I came up with a response to this question of diaspora. If you allow me, just 2-3 minutes perhaps, I want to read from this write-up because I tried to explain 3 different meanings of the present day so-called diaspora. Okay. The first one is that a portion of the people who have migrated, immigrated or exiled, Dawood Haidar was forced to leave the country. Toslim Nasrin was forced to leave the country, but not all of them. Not Abid Khan. But he is a privileged member of this diaspora. That's the problem. Okay. So a portion of the people who have migrated or exiled from the so-called third world countries to the developed ones, which should be considered as neo-colonial centers. The other problem is that diaspora or the post-colonial studies, they take it for granted that colonial rule, colonial practices have ended, and post-colonial phase has started. No, we are now more or less in a system, world economic system, which should be either labeled as colonial or as neo-colonial. This neo-colonial is inseparably connected to neoliberal. The last phase of capitalistic development in the West. So these neo-colonial centers, more specifically to US and its satellites, the focus of this definition is on the word portion, which is primarily represented by people like Homike Bhabha, Gayatri Chakraborty, or Edward Sai. The space, real or imagined or imaginary, that holds and nurtures this specific portion, group, segment, or class of people, and enables them to come up with discourses of resistance and negotiation to create a third space that exists within and gets its nourishment from the centers. That means this third space they talk about, we always talk about the third space, the homeland, the migrated place, and there is a third space for these diasporic people. But this third space exists within the centers, that means within the second space, or that is the first space, if you consider the privilege, the hierarchy. And this is the problem. The centers but posits to be outside of the inside. And more important than both, that the centers and the peripheral homelands, which are supposed to be brought by the third space to the center in order to be appropriated. That means they create this third space in order to take the homelands to the centers to be appropriated by the centers. That means diaspora or post-colonialism, the first phase of post-colonialism was developed by some European scholars as part of Orientalism. We have already forgot that. The second phase, second wave of post-colonialism, actually there are people from Australia, from New Zealand, from Canada, they joined. And now we are desperately trying to join that. This is the third phase. But the first phase was developed by the European scholars who are scholars of Orientalist studies. This is very important. Okay. Now the third meaning is that the sum total of all the discourses, especially written in the language of the center, and the local or third world or vernacular or unknown to the central language must not enter. This is another thing. English studies, yes, we would be talking about English writings in English, and Soyed Manzurul Islam sir felt like that if he would have allowed to use Bangla, his presentation could have been better. He talked about that. But